Good evening. Welcome to a beautiful snowy evening edition in Toronto. If you are in warmer weather at home with the watching, closing up with your warm coffee, warm hot chocolate, listening to your Kahal Yereim, Daf Yomi, we appreciate you at home. It's beautiful. It's nice. Chilly out here. It's wonderful. It's a great evening to learn your Daf Yomi. So snuggle up. We're ready on Daf Nunam Beis. We are 3 lines from the top. Damar Allah made migzir b'gzir shava. We were going through all the combinations. We have hekishes, we have gzir shavas, gav chomers, binyan avs. We went through all the possibilities where hekish was first and then another item second. We said hekish to hekish does not work. Hekish to gzir shava does not work. Hekish to kav chomer does work. And then we said hekish to binyan av. We didn't know. We weren't sure of that one. Then we started going on gzir shava. Gzir shava to hekish does work. Gzir shava to gzir shava does work. Now the question is, gzir shava to kal v'chomer, does that one work? So, here we go. If you start with your first limud as a gzir shava, can you then have a second limud to a kal v'chomer? So, it says, well, wait a second. Ma hekesh inu malami behekesh. Look, take a look. Hekesh first to hekesh second. Well, that does not work. That we already said does not work. How do we know that? Imei dirava mi diravina. Either, as we said yesterday, Rava had his proof and Ravina had his proof, right? And so, Malami bekal v'chomer. But we do see that if Hekish starts at the beginning, kal v'chomer works second. Which means kal v'chomer being the second one is stronger than Hekish being the second one, right? Because if it's Hekish, that does not work. Hekish kal v'chomer does work. So, midatana de Rishmal, how do we know that? Because we learned the Brisa Rabbi Shmuel, how that worked, right? So we learned that worked already. Gzeira shava hamamalamedes behekish midirav papa. Well, Gzeira shava goes to hekish. Rav Papa taught us that law. Gzeira shava goes to hekish. That works. So eino din shetil amid bekal v'chomer. So then for sure, Gzeira shava is going to go to kal v'chomer, right? That's if this one does not work and this one does work, then this one works. Then for sure this one works. Right? Makes good sense. This third one is the same parallel one as the sixth one. All right, good. So Papa. So that's very nice. If you hold that what it was that Rav Papa had said, right? He had said that there was a kal v'chomer from the fact that he said, what was Rav Papa's kal v'chomer? 1 second. We have to go back in time to Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, "V'zos Torah Zevachim imal toda." Right, he's going to learn. He learns. Right. Remember, there was a disagreement whether whether what was going on there was that we were learning from the shlomim to the toda, which was a hekish, and then we went to the next one, and then we said the toda we learned from meiser. So therefore, we know that you can do meiser sheni. You could use meiser sheni money to buy a korban toda, right? That was what we had said. That's what Rav Papa says. But others had disagreed, right? And said, no. Remember, that was an issue was if A was a chulin, because remember, he was learning from Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni was a chulin drasha. So therefore, this could have been a chulin. So we weren't sure whether we liked Rav Papa's answer or not. If you like Rav Papa's answer over here, and therefore hekish to kal v'chomer works, then for sure this works, right? But if you don't hold of Rav Papa, Elamanda lace later Rav Papa. What if you don't hold of Rav Papa? Michael, remember, what are you going to say? So Ella kal v'chomer. So we're going to say we've still got a kal v'chomer, okay, even without Rav Papa, because ma hekesh shein malamid behekesh, hekesh to hekesh does not work. Imi deravina, like Rav or Ravina had said, malamid bekal v'chomer. You can go hekesh to kal v'chomer. That we did say, right? Midatana debei Rabbi Shmuel, like Rabbi Shmuel said. Gzeira shava hamaledes b'gzeira shava, but then. Forget this one, because we're not 100% sure about Gzeira Shava to Hekish. We're going to skip that one for a moment. Gzeira Shava to Gzeira Shava, Chaverta, Midrami Barchama, because that we know, Gzeira Shava to Gzeira Shava, that works like Rami Barchama taught us. And Udinshal Talami B'Kavachomer. So then for sure, Gzeira Shava Kavachomer is going to work. Remember, Hekish to Hekish is not working. Gzeira Shava to Gzeira Shava is working. That means, which is stronger, Hekish or Gzeira Shava? Gzeira Shava is clearly stronger. Well, if that's true, if Gzeira Shava is stronger and Hekish to kal v'chomer works, then for sure Gzeira Shava to kal v'chomer works. So whichever way you're going to look at it, Gzeira Shava to kal v'chomer is going to work either from a kal v'chomer from here, right? Gzera Shava from here. Well, either from Gzera Shava from there, or Gzera Shava from, or a Kal V'chomer from there. It's going to be a Kal V'chomer. We're going to learn from one or the other, but it's going to be a Kal V'chomer, and that one's going to work. Okay, very nice. Next. What about the last Gzera Shava possibility? The last Gzera Shava possibility. I'm going to lose my place. I'm going to take my finger off. Last Gzera Shava possibility, Gzera Shava to a binyan av. I don't know where my red one is because the red one is better. Okay, if we can't, it's okay. I'll just. All right. So Gzera Shava to binyan av. What about that one? We're just going to go right to take it. We don't know the answer to that one. We didn't know the answer to it over here. We don't know the answer to it over here. We're just going to put a question mark by that one. Okay, and that's the way that we're going to leave that one. Okay, fine. Davar halame b'kal v'chomer. Now we go into the next set. Start with kal v'chomer, and then we're going to go to, and the second one, kal v'chomer is the first one, and the second one is going to be hekesh, right? Kal v'chomer and hekesh. How about that? So, kal v'chomer. Can I go from a kal v'chomer first to a hekesh second? Well, I can use a kal v'chomer to teach me that. Look, if I take a look at Gzera Shava, right, I can't learn it from a hekesh. Gzera Shava from hekesh does not work, right? Midra Rabbi Yochanan teaches us that rule. Melamed behekesh, midra Rav Papa. But a Gzera Shava could be the, I could learn Gzera Shava. One second, Midra Rabbi Yochanan. I lost my place. I keep looking over to the board. Gzera Shava can't teach after a hekesh, Midra Rabbi Yochanan, right? Can't teach this one, like Rabbi Yochanan says, that's the Gzera Shava after hekesh. That does not work. Melamed behekesh, it can teach to a hekesh, meaning Gzera Shava to hekesh does work. That one works. Gzera Shava to hekesh works. Midra Rav Papa, like Rav Papa said. Kal v'chomer, so for sure, halamed me hekesh, midatana de Rabbi Yishmael, if it's taught from a hekesh, like Rabbi Yishmael says, right? A kal v'chomer, which is taught from a hekesh, like Rabbi Yishmael says, and din shel yilamed behekesh. So for sure, you should be able to teach over to a kal v'chomer. So that's great. You've got a good kal v'chomer going there. You could say, yes, this one works. Because, I'm not going to be able to draw anymore. We're just going to have to wing it. If not, it's okay. Fine. We'll just have to buy some more. Okay, fine. We're just going to have to keep on going with it like this, okay? So, we've got if you're going to, that's great, but you need Rav Papa. You need this statement of Rav Papa in order for that to work. But if you don't hold Rav Papa, what are you going to say? I'm not going to be sure about that. Okay, so that resolves that one. Rav Papa's going to say this one works, and if you don't hold Rav Papa, then we're going to say we don't know. Davar halame b'kal v'chomer. The next one's going to be kal v'chomer first. Mahu shilame b'gzera shava. Can I go from kal v'chomer to gzera shava? That's going to be the next one. So, kal v'chomer, so we'll start with the kal v'chomer. Ma gzera shava, she'ena lemeda behekesha. A gzera shava can't be learned after a hekesh. This gzera shava can't be learned after a hekesh. Midra Rabbi Yochanan, like Rabbi Yochanan says. Melamed b'gzera shava, a gzera shava can be learned from a gzera shava, right? Because Midra Rami Bar Chama teaches us that. Kal v'chomer, halomed behekesh, a kal v'chomer, which is more important that because it can be learned from a hekesh, right? Kal v'chomer is more strict than a gzera shava. Midatana Rabbi Yishmael, like Rabbi Yishmael says, din shel b'gzera shava. So for sure, kal v'chomer can be learned from a gzera shava. So if I go kal v'chomer first, then gzera shava second, that one will work. Okay, so that works. Great. Next, davar halame b'kal v'chomer. What if I've got the first one's a kal v'chomer, mashilame b'kal v'chomer? Can I have kal v'chomer and kal v'chomer? So the answer to that one is a kal v'chomer, right? Kal v'chomer makes kal v'chomer. Why? Ma gzera shava. If I'm going to take a look at a gzera shava she'ena lemeda behekesh, a gzera shava doesn't work after a hekesh. right? How do we know that? Read Rabbi Yochanan, just like Rabbi Yochanan already said. Melamed bekal v'chomer, but a hekesh can go teach a kal v'chomer, which shows me that kal v'chomers are easier to learn than gzera shavas, kid da amran, like we said already. As we said, that kal v'chomer, ha'lamed me hekesh, so a kal v'chomer, which can be learned from a hekesh, which we already said up here, right? Midatana to Rabbi Yishmael. So, sorry, Kal v'chomer can learn Hekesh, this one, right? Kal v'chomer, which can be learned from a Hekesh, like the yeshiva Rabbi Yishmael learned. Eino din she yelamed bekal v'chomer. So then for sure, Kal v'chomers are better. So if a Kal v'chomer can be learned after a Hekesh, Kal v'chomers can be learned after a Kal v'chomer. The problem with that is, v'zehu Kal v'chomer ben Kal v'chomer. So he says the problem is that you've got a double Kal v'chomer there. In other words, you need to be able to know that a kal v'chomer is stronger than a gzera shava, which we learned from a kal v'chomer, and then we know that that one is stronger from another kal v'chomer. Well, you've got kal v'chomer. I'd love to be able to draw it on the thing. It would be much easier for me to explain this part if I was
set of dryers tomorrow.
I was writing this whole thing down in order just because I knew this case was coming, and it's impossible to explain without the diagram. But okay. We'll try, right? You've got a kal v'chomer. You've got kal v'chomer number 1, right? Kal v'chomer is from Gzera Shava, which is not learned in a Hekesh from Rabbi Yochanan and teaches in a Kal v'chomer, like we said, Kal v'chomer, which is learned from a Hekesh from the Tana of Rabbi Yishmael, should for sure be able to teach a Kal v'chomer. So that is a Kal v'chomer that teaches me after another Kal v'chomer, which is 2 Kal v'chomers in order to get to that step. Basically, I'm learning a Kal v'chomer from one of these, and then this was a Kal v'chomer from one of these. So the logic is thinner and thinner the more kal v'chomers you get, and we're not quite sure how far that goes. But a kal v'chomer and from another kal v'chomer, okay, we'll let that pass. But ben beno shel kal v'chomer, it's actually not. It's actually a 3-level kal v'chomer if you think about it. Why? Because since it's a kal v'chomer from a kal v'chomer, you've got one kal v'chomer teaching me, right? If I'm learning din A to din B from a kal v'chomer, and then din B to din C from a kal v'chomer, and then I know that works from a kal v'chomer from here. You see how we're going kal v'chomers and kal v'chomers and kal v'chomers? It's like broken telephone. The more kal v'chomers you have to get to your final law, the less authentic you are. And at some point, you lose the thread. Right? At some point, you lose the thread. So rather, we're going to have to try again with a new kal v'chomer that's more direct. And that's what we're going to do now. Ella kal v'chomer, here's the kal v'chomer we're going to try to do. Ma hekesh, ein li mei behekesh. We're going to start from the beginning here. Hekesh to hekesh. That does not work. Imi derava, imi derava, either like Rava said or Ravina said. Melamed bekal v'chomer, so it's going to be able to teach hekesh, and a kal v'chomer does work. As the yeshiva Rabbi Yishmael said. Kal v'chomer halamid me hekesh. So the other way, kal v'chomer, which is learned from a hekesh, midatana de Rabbi Yishmael, eino din she yelami bekal v'chomer. So this kal v'chomer is clearly stronger. Shouldn't that be able to teach a kal v'chomer? V'zehu kal v'chomer ben kal v'chomer. That's just one step, kal v'chomer, because we're going to learn this kal v'chomer directly to here, rather than go from here to here to here. So therefore, if we're going directly from here to here, that's only one step. Okay, we'll get. Yes, as I say, this one is a little bit. I'm just going to go on because without drawing it on the diagram, it really is confusing. It took me a very long time to figure it out, and I drew it out. Right? But okay, fine. We move on. We get the idea that kal v'chomer to kal v'chomer does work. Right? Now, davar halami b'kal v'chomer. What if kal v'chomer is your first limud? Manchi lami b'binyanav. Can I go to a binyanav second? So that we're going to say Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah is going to teach me as follows. Toshma, come and listen. Malak v'nimtze streifa. Let's say a Kohen is doing malika on a bird. Okay, malika again is the Kohen holds the bird. He's doing either a korban ola or a korban chatos. That's a bird, right? For example, pregnant woman brings her offering. It's going to be a bird offering. She brings an ola and chatos. So the Kohen's going to hold the bird in his hand, and he takes his long fingernail with this hand, and he punctures the neck of the animal of the bird from the back. Okay, he does that, and now the bird, when he starts to open up the bird, right? He investigates and finds that the bird has punctured lungs. And it's a treifa. Treifas cannot be eaten. So now the question is, Can you eat that bird? Can the Kohen eat the bird?
No,
You're going to say, no, it's treifa. But the problem is that normally, if I just took my fingernail and killed a bird right now, I couldn't eat that because that's not shechita.
Right.
So is the point that is the Torah telling me that Malika overrides all of these problems and just makes a bird edible? And therefore I don't have to worry about shechita, I don't have to worry about treifa, I don't have to worry about anything? Or is it that Malika takes the place of shechita, but I still have to worry about treifa? That's the question. So,
or you just put a bird for a carbanola if you can eat it.
Yes, but this is going to be a korban chatos, right? A korban ola, right? And once it's designated, you can't undesignate it. Or we will learn when we talk about designating korbanos. If Maseches Kinim, you'll learn all about, because they have to come in pairs, the nests, right? So you bring two birds at the same time. One is an ola, one is a chatos. If you designate one as the ola, the other one is already designated as a chatos. You can't simply rearrange them, right? You can't open it up and say, oh, actually, I changed my mind to make this into a korban ola. Can't do that. And remember, right, if you shachted a korban chatos to l'shem ola, that would invalidate it,
Right.
even. So, okay, so now, so here's what's happening. Malik v'nim says treifa. So he does malika and he finds that it is treif. Rabbi Meir Omer ena metama bebeis habliya. Rabbi Meir says that if the Kohen does eat it, so it does not cause tuma when the Kohen swallows it. Now, what would cause tuma? If you have a non-shechted bird, that's called nevela. Nevela is a animal that is not shechted. That's the term for it, nevela. If one eats fowl bird that is not been shechted, when you swallow the meat, it becomes tummy. You become tummy. Okay, so if you go to the store, I don't know what the non-kosher brand of chicken here is. They used to say Purdue chicken. Used to be the one that was in the United States. Whatever the non-kosher brand of chicken is, KFC. You go and you get some KFC chicken. You swallow it and you become tummy because not when you touch it, but when you swallow it, you're swallowing nevela. Okay, but says Rabbi Meir, you're not mitame in this circumstance. Not mitame bebeis habliya when you swallow it. Okay, and we're going to see what his source is for that, right? Because the bird is not kosher, right? The bird is treifa. That's what invalidates. In order for you to be, it has to be a nevela that's tahor, a nevela that's kosher, in order for it to be mitame you bebeis habliya. Rabbi Yehuda says that tameya mitama bebeis habliya. It does make you tummy when you swallow it. So Rabbi Meir says, Kal v'chomer. How could you say that? I'll tell you a Kal v'chomer. Uman nevelas behema shemetama b'maga u b'masa. If you have an animal, so the rule by an animal is that if you have a carcass of an animal, touching it or carrying it transfers tumah. Okay, so that's the carcass of a nevela of an animal is stricter in that you don't have to swallow that meat in order for it, but touching it and carrying it makes you tameh. Shrita sa mitaheres, treifa sa mitumasa. If you do shrita on it, it's not nevela. Even if the animal is treifa, it's not a nevela, and therefore it's going to purify it. That shrita is going to purify it from being metame, even if you touch it or carry it. It can't make you tame, despite the treif status. Nevelas oaf. So then, when it comes to a bird, she'ein metame b'mago masa. The bird tuma is even less. It doesn't make you tame just by touching it. Eino din shetehe shchita sa mitaheres treifa sa mituma sa. So for sure, if you do malika to that bird, which is equivalent to shchita, so for sure that should make it so that you cannot become tame when you swallow that bird. Okay, so mematzinu. So he says, well, you have to take a look, and he says, yeah, well, we have this is our mematzinu. Here's our rule. Just like we saw b'shchita shemechasharta b'achila, and he's going to say that malika is the equivalent of shchita. Why? Because shchita, it makes a bird kosher to eat, mitaheres treifasa. It is then going to, which we learned in the Kal v'chomer, make it so that it is tahor from being a treifa, right? Mitumasa, so it won't make you tameh. Af malika, so malika will work too. Shemechasharta ba'achila to taher treifasa mitumasa. So now what we see is we learned in the first place that a Kal v'chomer, we had a Kal v'chomer first, that a bird is less tameh than a animal. and the shchita is going to save it. Then we learned a mematzinu, a binyanav, and said that malika is the equivalent of shchita because it permits you to eat it. So those are the two steps you need to take. Step one, you need to say a bird has less stringencies than an animal, and then number two, you have to say malika equals shchita, and so therefore it's permissible. Okay, Rabbi Yossi says, Daya kinevelas behema tehora sheshchita sa mitaharta velo melikta. He says Rabbi Yossi, he says, okay, well, that's where you got to call it here. Your Kal V'chomer tells us that shchita works, doesn't tell us anything about malika. Malika is an extra step. There's no such, I can't come along with my fingernail and kill a goat and now say that it's not metame b'masal. You would be metame masal makkah. So therefore, it doesn't work that way. Velohi, so he says, but that's not true. Hasam tihave hi mishchita dechulin ka'asyan. And he says the only thing is, so therefore what we wanted to prove is that according to Rabbi Meir, right, you can do this. You can learn this shchit. You can learn from at least there's one opinion that says you can learn a kal v'chomer and then a binyanav, but that's not true. That's different because remember the origin is shchita of chulin. The first kal v'chomer that he learned was that if shchita from an animal over to the shchita of the bird, well, shchita of an animal and a bird have nothing to do with korbanos. We said that the prohibitions of these double steps only apply if both of the things that we're trying to learn have to do with korbanos. The first thing here doesn't have to do with korbanos, so that doesn't prove anything. So that's no proof. So therefore, we leave that one with a big question mark. Again, no proof about Kal V'chomer de Binyanav. Now, we've got one last set. Okay, one last set, and then we move on. Davar halamed bebinyan av. We're going to start with binyan av first. Mahu sheyalamed behekish. So ubegzera shava, ubekal v'chomer, ubebinyan av. We'll try to knock them off. The Gemara is even getting tired of it. The Gemara is let's just knock them off all three at the same time. What's the rule? We know what's going to happen. We've got binyan av first. Can you learn binyan av to hekish? Can you learn binyan av to gzera shava? Can you learn binyan av to kal v'chomer? So pashat meha chada. So we don't know the answer to most of those. Can't learn. We have no source to be able to teach it. But one of them we can. Okay, one of them. Mipnei ma amru lon bedam kosher shehare lon beemurin kosher. Sorry, I put it in mipnei. We're going to try to do each one, which is going to be, which one are we going to do? The last one. Can you have a binyan av teach over to another binyan av? That's going to be what we're going to try to do. We're going to try binyan av 1 to binyan av 2. So here's how we go. First, why do we say mipnei ma amru lon badam kosher? How do we know the Chachamim say that as far as blood, and you haven't sprinkled the blood, you slaughtered the korban and you've got the blood, and if you leave it overnight, right? So then, how do we know that you can't? Let's say that you left it overnight.
Where did we say that before?
So you can't do zrika. That let's say you do sprinkle it anyway, the korban will be kosher. Right? You're not supposed to, but you did it anyway. The korban's kosher. Why? Sharelan be'imurin kosher. Because we're going to do a mematzinu by also the fats that are burned on the mizbeach. Right? Because by korbanos, if you have not burned them until the morning, right? So then you're not supposed to burn them anymore. They're not supposed to be burned up. But we learned by the Mizbeach that if you bring the fats up to be burnt, right? We're nun aleph amid aleph. So if you have fats that are that were not supposed to be burned, if you burn them up in the Mizbeach is going to rescue them. And so therefore the Mizbeach says, okay, once you've brought it up, don't take it down, leave it up there. Okay. So, lon be'imurin kosher, shari lon bebasar kosher. How do we know that is the case as well? By this, that b'di'evet, if you brought the fats up on the mizbeach, then if you throw them b'di'evet, that it's kosher. The answer is because we have a binyan av from the meat of the shlamim. Because the meat of the shlamim, you have 2 days to eat it and not 1. So therefore, if you leave your shlamim, you do a korban shlamim during the day. The following night, you're supposed to eat it. If you don't finish it, you wait till the next day. You can still eat it. So he says it's a mematzinu and a mematzinu. We go from the meat which you can eat on the second day, to tell us.
How do you refrigerator keep it cool?
They didn't eat. Well, you can leave meat out for a day, 2 days, right? That you can get away, right? If it's very fresh, right? You can get away with that, right? I'm not. No, we're not so sure after that, right? But remember, they also used to dry meat and things, so you can get away with it. Okay, so salted, right? Heavily salted. In any event, if you can eat the meat on the second day, that means that we can say that even though it's not ideal, you can also burn the fats. And if you can burn the fats, then mematzinu, you can also throw the blood. That's how that works. Mematzinu to mematzinu. Okay, so that means that we're going from binyan av over to another binyan av, right? Now, the Gemara says, Yotzei. Let's say I have limbs from an ola, korban ola. Okay, and it leaves the boundaries of the azara of the Beis Hamikdash area. Okay, right? Again, here's our Beis Hamikdash area. Kachim, we said have to be eaten inside the azara area. So if the meat goes outside, they take it out to here. So then that's going to be pasul. Okay, so therefore Yotzei. So we say that if you do that, what if you now bring them back in and you bring it onto the mizbeach? So that also is going to be effective. Why? Because we're going to see we're going to have a binyan av that tells us that during the old days, before there was a Beis Hamikdash, they used to be able to bring a korban ola outside the Beis Hamikdash, and that means that they were always burned outside the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, since at one point it was okay to burn them outside the Beis Hamikdash, even though now we cannot, if you did it anyway, brought it up on the Mizbeach, then don't take it down. It's not that big a psul that you have to take it off the Mizbeach.
But would you get punished if you...
Is there a lo saseh? Yes, there's probably I think there's a lo saseh, right? That says you're not supposed to burn it. But once it's alu lo yardu, that's what we say by the Mizbeach. Once it goes up, don't take it back down. Okay? That's the next. Then the Brisa says, tameh. Let's say you have an ola that becomes tameh. And now it's pasul, right? You're not supposed to bring it on the Mizbeach also. Hol v'huter ba'avodas tzibur. Well, we know that there's a circumstance that you can bring tameh meat onto the Mizbeach. And that is, if it's a community offering where most of the people are tameh. Like we had that by Korban Pesach, right? Most of the people are tameh, and then you can bring the korban in a state of tuma on the mizbeach. So therefore, if you bring this one when you're not supposed to bring it up when it's tameh, leave it up there. Okay. All these circumstances basically tell me that even though it's not what I'm supposed to do, since there's a circumstance where it is permissible, then it's okay. Now, chutz lizmano. What if I have pigul intent, and I think that when I'm doing the shechita, I think I'm going to throw the blood outside the right. Meratze pigulo, since the blood application, right, is going to make it acceptable to become pigul, right? So then you can leave if you bring the meat up. So then you should leave that there too. Okay. Chutz limkomo. Let's say you have in mind that you're going to do part of the avoda outside of the Beis Hamikdash area. Since there's a hekish, comparing it to outside of the time, and we said just outside of the right time, also can be burned on the Mizbeach. So too, this can be burned on the Mizbeach. So therefore, the general rule with a lot of these things, that even though they're pasul and you're not supposed to burn them on the Mizbeach, if somebody made a mistake and brought it up to the Mizbeach, then leave it there. Okay, that's our rule. That's what this Brisa is talking about. One more that the Brisa makes clear: Shekibu psulin v'zarku daman. Let's say somebody who's a non-Kohen catches the blood, and they throw the blood. Okay, and so now this non-Kohen does that. So b'hanach psulin dechazu la'avodas tzibur. Right, so we're talking about those that are pasul.
Whole thing about Moshe's
So if the psul, if the person who's pasul, we had lots of different reasons why somebody could be pasul for being a kohen for service. So if the psul, if this is an invalidation, which is not a problem in the circumstance when there's a community offering, like for example, the kohen is tameh, right? So the kohen is tameh, is not supposed to be serving. But again, if everybody's tameh and this is a community korban, then the kohen can be tameh. And therefore, in this circumstance, if the community was not tamei, if the kohen was tamei who did it, then you could bring it up, or if you brought it up, you shouldn't take it down. However, that's correct. Sorry about that.
Make sure it's still working.
That's
There we go. Okay, good. Sorry about that. Okay, so I could wave my hands too much. If go watch that on slow motion replay, figure out what I did wrong. Okay, I'll go back and watch the tape. Circle it with my red marker. There, right there. That's okay. Good. Okay, so if the psul, however, is something that's never acceptable, like the guy wasn't a kohen in the first place, right? Or it was a woman, or any of the other psulim that you can't do under any circumstance, then if that meat goes up on the korban on the mizbeach, you have to take it down, right? That is a worse invalidation, and therefore you have to take it down. So again, only under circumstances where we had other situations where the same thing would be permissible. In this case, it's a psul. If it goes up, don't take it down. But if it's something that's invalid under all circumstances like this, then once it goes up, then take it down. Now. The Gemara wants to know the point of this whole brisa that we brought, lengthy brisa, was that we had a binyanav and then a second binyanav. Binyanav number one was we went from eating the meat validly to saying that you can burn the meat, even though that's not what you're supposed to do. Just don't take it down.
Even if it's invalid.
And then we went even one step further. We said even throw the blood, even though you're not supposed to. If you threw the blood, the mizbeach is going to say that's okay as well. Now, question is, v'chidonin davar shelo b'echshero midavar b'echshero. That's how binyanav works. What is a binyanav? A binyanav is when the Torah tells us a rule. Then we want to apply. You've been thinking about it. You're going, wait a second. I don't want to say it, but right? You're like, wait a second. Okay, he's already. I was watching this. A binyanav is when the Torah tells us a rule, and then we apply that rule to all similar circumstances. Well, kosher meat, eating it on a second day, is a situation when that's permissible. To compare that to when you're not allowed to burn the fats, that's not comparable. Those are not comparable cases. How's that a binyanav? So the answer is, because of that, the Gemara says the brisa must be meaning something differently. Rather, Tana mizos Toras ha'ola riba samichle. The fact is that it's not a hekesh to hekesh that they're learning. Because if it was a hekesh to hekesh, it wouldn't work. I mean, a binyanav, it's not binyanav. Because if that's a binyanav, it's not going to work. They're learning it from the fact that it says this is the rule of the ola. So therefore, that they're telling us that b'di eved, Emur and fats that are puzzle, right? The pasuk is going to say there's a connection to the pasuk Zos Torah Sa'ola, which is the Ola on the Mizbeach Kol Alayla, right? So that pasuk is telling us that there's one rule for all of the Korban Olas on the Mizbeach, that once they go up, they don't come down. So therefore, even though it sounds like the Bryce is really telling us it's a binyanav, it really wasn't. It's what we call Xeris HaKosav. It's written in the pasuk, extra words, in order to make a riboy, telling me that this is also going to include this case as well. So even though there really isn't from a binyanav to be able to say that it's permissible, it's not really. Even though, why? Because everything else in the Mishnah was following, the Bryce was following that flow. So they put this case in, even though that's not the real source. So we call this, and we like the way that this is phrased is it's nasmachta, meaning sometimes the Chachamim will tell us we learn it from this, even though that's not really how we learn it, right? It's the right law, but that's not the real source. And that doesn't usually happen. Bryces will do it. Sometimes we will have this, you'll hear this Gemara which will say asmachta b'alma. Normally, by the way, when we see asmachta b'alma is when there's a rabbinic enactment and the rabbis will pick a pasuk that sort of hints at what they want to do, even though it's not the real source for it because they invented it. They might pick a pasuk to hint at what they were trying to do. Right? That's an asmach. Why would rabbis do that? Because it helps you remember the law. It also provides some sort of material support for the idea that they had. Even the Torah sort of hints to it, right? But still rabbinic law. Here, they're actually teaching you the wrong drasha, which is probably something only a brisa would do. Like we said, brises are not canonized mishnahs, right?
Why
so they're
Why believe the brisa?
Well, because in practice it doesn't work. It's the brisa is not. There's an obvious problem with the brisa. So bottom line is from binyanav to anything, we don't have any proofs. We don't know what happens. Binyanav to another binyanav, there's no proofs. Okay, next, let's go back to the Mishnah. Okay, remember in the Mishnah we said that the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur, shiyari hadam, the leftover blood after you sprinkle. We said the next step is you go out to the courtyard and you pour the blood into the yesod of the mizbeach, the base of the mizbeach. So we shachted it here. We caught the blood. We brought it inside. We sprinkled it here. We sprinkled it here. We put it on this mizbeach here. Then we come outside with the rest of the leftover blood. We go to the mizbeach and we pour it over here. So this picture of the mizbeach, right? You're coming down the steps, and there is the yesod right there. That's the Kohen in action, pouring the blood right in action. Perfect picture. Okay. Now, right. The only issue with this picture is that if he was doing that, there probably wouldn't be a guy standing there doing that, right? Or I wouldn't be doing that. Okay. Because fine. Okay. My taima. What is the reason? What's the source for pouring the blood of this bull and the goat of Yom Kippur onto this western drain? So Amar Kra, the pasuk says, El Yisod Mizbeach HaOlah Asher Pesach Oel Moed. So it says in the pasuk that you're going to take the blood of these korbanos of the Par Kohen Mashiach, incidentally, right? Again, the source for a lot of these is going to be the bull of the Kohen Mashiach, and then we learned connections from the bull of the Kohen Mashiach, which was inside the Heichal Korban, to all of the other ones. We said the goat follows the procedure of the goat, the bull follows the procedure of the bull, like we had learned before. So it says that you're supposed to take the blood of this bull and you're going to pour it into the Mizbeach HaOlah, which is this outer Mizbeach, that's called the Mizbeach HaOlah, which is by the opening of the Oel Moed. What do you mean it's by the Oel? Of course it's by the Oel Moed. And walk out the door, there it is. What does that mean by the opening? Hahu de Paga Beresha, the hole in the Mizbeach that you meet immediately when you come out. Because there's a hole over here also, which we're going to learn why that one's there, right? That's not the one you use, because in order to get to that one, you'd have to walk past this one. You got to go to this one, right? It's the one that you meet first. That's why it has to be on the one that you're going to do on the west side. Right? Good. Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis learned. El Yesod Mizbeach. First, we have several in these psukim, right? It was introduced here. We've got several times that the word says that you're going to pour the blood El Yesod HaMizbeach to the base of the Mizbeach. There are 5 different paragraphs that have to do with Korban Chatos, so the first one is Korban Chatos of the Kohen Mashiach, right? The anointed bull, and we have the Korban Chatos by the based in the what do you call it? Parel Davar. That's when Basin makes a mistake. That's number 2. Then we have the korban of the Nasi. That's when the king makes his mistake. He brings a goat, right? He brings that. That's the third one. The 4th and the 5th is the korban chatos of an individual, where he has to bring a keves or a seir, right? So those are individual korbanos that he's going to bring a goat or a sheep. Right? And so those are all our korban chatos, all the different korban chatos. All of the 5 of them, right? It says that we're going to pour their blood into the base of the mizbeach. The first 3, right? The pasuk says, it says by those, it says yesod mizbeach ha'olah. You're going to pour it into the mizbeach, the base of the mizbeach ha'olah. So 3 separate times in the Torah now, it repeats the phrase, pour it into the yesod mizbeach ha'olah. Now, we already know that these korbanos are connected, right? They're all korban chatos. And so therefore, the question is, why do we have to keep saying over and over and over, pour it into the base of the mizbeach ha'olah? That's the question. So, first, let's get started. First one is by the bull. Again, this is in Vayikra Daled. So in 4th parak of Vayikra, it says, you're going to take the blood of the par of the Kohen Mashiach, and you're going to pour it El Yesod Mizbach Ha'olah. You're going to pour it into the base of the Mizbach Ha'olah. Okay? Velo, so that one, what's that purpose of that pasuk? Whenever the pasuk is going to repeat different thing, the same thing over and over, it's going to teach me a different law every time. Right? That's our rule. Right? Where do we see that also? Right? Lo sevashel gedi b'chol vimo. Don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. Tells me one time you're not allowed to cook it. One time you're not allowed to eat it. One time you're not allowed to get any benefit from it. Each time tell me a new law, right?
That's where we learn looking meats.
That's correct. This is now going to tell us new laws every time it says Ve'el Yisod Mizbeach. So this is going to tell me that when you pour it, you're not velo yisod mizbeach pnimi. You're not supposed to pour it into the base of the mizbeach that's inside, because there was a mizbeach that we just sprinkled it in the mizbeach. So the pasuk says you're supposed to pour it into the base of the mizbeach. Maybe it means the base of the mizbeach that you were right next to. The answer is no. You're supposed to pour it to the yisod mizbeach ha'olah. You go outside and pour it there. Number 2. Then it says again by the parelam davar, by the bull that where Beis Din made a mistake. It says el yisod mizbeach ha'olah. Right? It's going to say they're going to pour it into the base of the mizbeach olah. So what's that one for? Ein lo yisod lepnimi atzmo. The answer is to tell me not only don't you pour the blood into the base of the inner mizbeach has no base, right? Doesn't even have a base. The mizbeach hapnimi just looks like we drew it once before.
And this time,
And I'm not going to be able to draw it 3D because I'm not going to draw it at all. It's a ghost mizbeach, but it's just straight, right? It has nothing. There's nothing else to it. So therefore, there's no base at all. Okay, so that's from the second one. Then Gimel, the third one is El Yisod Mizbach Olah. So that one, what is that for? So that tells me Tain Yisod LeMizbeach Shel Olah. That means that you're going to pour the blood, the leftover blood, anything that any korban where there's sprinkling of the blood. Right, so that needs to have those korbanos, even the ones that are done outside, also have to have their blood poured onto the base of the mizbeach. So a korban olah, after you sprinkle the blood, you take the remainder of the blood and you pour it into the base of the mizbeach. All of the korbanos, you take the extra blood and you pour it in. Why? Because it says a third time, pour the blood to the base of the mizbeach, and it can't be talking about these korbanos. We already said that once. We already said it twice. So that's what it's for.
told me to ship them because this really was totally reliable. We shipped them, I think.
Okay, and besides, that third time is written by the korban of the nasi, right? That's the king's korban, and his korban wasn't brought in the base of Mikdash at all. His korban was different in that everybody else's was a female goat, his was a male goat, but it was brought outside as well. So therefore, it needs to be brought into the base of the mizbeach. That is now the rule by all of the korbanos where the blood is sprinkled. Okay, now the Gemara wants to know, the Brisa wants to know, Ela lemizbacha shel ola yehei yisod. Maybe what this is really telling us is that when you sprinkle the blood of the korban ola, because where it says lemizbeach, it says el yisod mizbach ha'olah. Maybe what it means is the blood of the ola has to go to the base, which means that when you sprinkle the blood of the olah, so you have to sprinkle it at the location where there is a base. Now, in this picture, right, we have just this side of the mizbeach. There's a base that goes around here. It goes around this side and then stops. This side and this side, you see this right here, has no base. If you look at the overhead picture, right, in the overhead picture, if you look at it carefully, right, you can see there's a dark line here, right? That's the base, goes around the north side, it goes around the west side. But there is no base around the south and the east side. Okay? That base is not there.
Why was there no base there?
We're going to learn it right now. Okay? Good question. So that base does not exist. Now, maybe this phrase, El Yisodim, is this is telling me that when I sprinkle the blood of the Olah, right, and I'm going to put it onto two corners, that I need to sprinkle the blood on the corners where there is a Yisod, because the Yisod is essential for the sprinkling. So therefore, sprinkle it on corner here and corner here. Now, we can't be talking about this corner because the opposite corner of here is here and it has no base, right? So therefore, this corner is for sure no good, which makes this corner no good because you got to have two corners, which by sprinkling on those two corners, you're going to wind up on all four sides. So you need opposite corners. This corner is going to work. This corner is going to work, okay? So maybe that is what this is coming to tell us. So, there's going to be a couple of different possible answers to that the Bryce is going to bring. Amar Rabbi Yishmael says, Kal v'chomer. Well, I'll tell you Kal v'chomer. Ma shirayim she'ein mechaprin te'unin yisod tchilas ola she'mechaperes enodin she'tehuna yisod. I don't need a pasuk to tell me that. Why? Because, look, the leftover blood is of less importance than the main blood, right? The main blood gets you a kapara and makes your korban valid. The leftover blood is just an extra mitzvah to pour it. If you don't do it, right? We said it's a mitzvah. If you don't do it, it's not going to validate the korban. If the blood that you pour the extra needs to be in a base, then for sure the main blood needs to be in a base. It needs to be over a place that has a base. And therefore, if I can learn that from a kal v'chomer, I don't need the pasuk to tell me that. Hence, the pasuk is to tell me that there's a base application by all the other korbanos. That's how Rabbi Shmuel says. Rabbi Akiva says, Ma shirayim she'in mechaprin ein boin lekapara ve'ein boin lekapara. Rabbi Akiva says something cryptic, which we're going to have to wait and be able to understand. Rabbi Akiva says, not only this blood, this shirayim blood, it does not become a kapara, and it doesn't come as a kapara. We're going to see what that means. Okay, we'll explain what that is in a moment. So that's when it comes to the extra blood. That extra blood is not necessary. Same basic answer, right? Only he throws an extra phrase in here. We have to understand what he means by the extra phrase. That it's not only it doesn't cause a kapara and it isn't a kapara. We're going to explain what he means by that. So the extra blood is not does not cause that. The initial sprinkling of the ola does create a kapara. For sure, it needs a base. Same idea. So therefore, both of them say, I don't need, so in Cain, if that's the case, I don't need that third pasuk to tell me that. So what is it for? Ten yesod lemizbecha shel ola. So it's going to tell me that the blood of all the karbanos, they're supposed to be placed onto the mizbeach, on the external mizbeach. You have to pour their blood into the yesod as well. Okay, now the Gemara is now going to explain this brisa in detail. Amar Mar, we said, El Yesod Mizbeach Ola, the first El Yesod Mizbeach says that you're supposed to pour it onto the Mizbeach Ola, velo Mizbeach Pnimi, not the inside one. Ha mi boile legufei. Well, before you learn a drasha, sometimes you have to read the pasuk and just understand the pasuk for what it says, right? The pasuk says, pour the blood into the base. And you're saying, this comes to tell me it's the outer mizbeach, not the inner mizbeach. Well, why not tell me in the first place that you have to pour the blood into the base, right? I don't have a pasuk telling me they're pouring blood into a base. That's the first purpose of the pasuk. Before you give me another drush to tell me to go outside instead of inside, tell me first of all that I've got to pour it into a base, right? What would it have said if I wanted to pour it into the base on the inside? It would have said it the same way. So therefore, the answer is, May asher pesach ohel moed nafka. Therefore, we're going to learn this from the fact that the pasuk says that it's going to be on the opening of the ohel moed. Right? It says onto the yesod of the mizbeach ha'olah. So, which tells me, right? If it would have told me, that I would put the 1 second.
With what? I'm not trying to do that on purpose. Has to know. It could be that he could be merachim. You could if
the pasuk had just said the phrase that the asher pesach ol moed, you're supposed to go and put it onto the blood that's on the altar, which is by the door of the mizbeach, I would have already understood that it applies to the outer mizbeach because that's the one that's outside by the door. So therefore, why does the pasuk says mizbeach ola? Why does it call it the ola one? So that's to tell me that the only place that you can put it is on the outer mizbeach. Not that you could also put it on the outer mizbeach or the inner mizbeach, but it tells me it must be on the outer mizbeach from there. Okay, the next one is el yesod mizbeach ola onto yesod of mizbeach ola. So, therefore, bonus. So, Tein Yesod Lemizbeach Shel Ola, that tells me you have to put a base, right on 51b for about 8 seconds. So, we're going to place it on. We're going to put the Yesod of the Mizbeach of the Ola. That means that you're supposed to put a base on. That there's a base on the Mizbeach Ola, but there is no base on the inner one. So, if the pasuk would have said, right, Hani Lamali, right, if this was talking about this, right, so I'm sorry, that's the third one already. The third one is telling me, right, so it tells me that that there's no base to the inside one, and the third one tells me that I have to put it onto the base that all of the korbanos need an application into the base of the outer mizbeach all of the outside korbanos need as well. Because if it was only telling me that only this one, that it's telling me only the Seir Nasi himself. Maybe it's just telling me, hey, the Seir Nasi is the only outside korban that you have to pour into the base, and not to make a general rule about all of them. So lama li leshirayim. So ha broi ovid luhu. So he says, why would we have to spell out that you have to put it on the outer mizbeach? It's not necessary. Everything was done on the outer mizbeach. Just tell me, pour it into the base. You've been outside this whole time. You've been doing everything outside. Just pour it into the base. The fact that it says that it has to be on the mizbeach ha'olah comes to tell me that you have to also pour it on the outer mizbeach, right? So if all of the inside korbanos I was sprinkling inside and then I had to go outside to pour it, then by the nasi, where I was outside anyway, of course I'm going to put it on the outside. Now, v'chitema de'apich mepach. Maybe the answer is, well, I would have thought that everything is backwards. It's all reversed, right? De'broi legavai, de'gavai lebroi. That if you sprinkle the blood inside, then you got to pour shiraim outside, and if you do the sprinkling of the blood outside, then you got to go inside and pour the blood. Maybe that's why the pasuk has to specify that we pour the shiraim for the korban nasi, the nasi's chatas outside. So the answer is ha'ein lo yesod lepnimiatzma. We already told us that the second time that it told us that you're pouring out, that you pour in the mizbeach olah, was to tell me that there is no base to the korban inside, to the mizbeach inside. So you couldn't think that you could have applied it inside. So the fact that it tells me next time pour it into the base on the outside, there's no, of course, pour it into the base by itself. I would have known, pour it into the base. The fact that it says pour it into the base of the mizbeach that's outside tells me that that's a rule by all the korbanos. Okay, wonderful. So then we say, oh, Eino.
You could have rachamim.
Maybe we'll stop here. We'll stop here at 9:30. We'll stop here and pick up from.
Right?
Yes.
Ella, right?
Where does it go?